Our politicians are corrupt. There is massive unemployment, the level of poverty in the country is alarming, Nigeria is in trouble. The next election is going to be a joke, our politicians will just rig as usual. Tade listened as his friend rambled on about Nigeria's socio-political problems. It was not the first time and sadly, it was not going to be the last time he had heard something like that before. In fact, he had been hearing similar things since he was a kid and it now sounded like a broken record in his ears. He was in a clubhouse with his friends and they were all having a nice time. It was early in the evening, around 7 p.m., and there was music everywhere. He sipped from his glass of beer as he conversed with his friends and when it was around 8:30 p.m., he went back to his room in the Agbowo area of Ibadan. He was a 300-level student of mechanical engineering of the University of Ibadan and he was in his first semester. He shared the room with 3 of his friends. When he got to his apartment, his roommates were around and they were watching movies. However, he was not interested and so he just slept off. When he woke up in the middle of the night, he was surprised to hear one of his friends, Henry, talking in a feminine voice with someone on his mobile phone. His voice sounded so feminine that anyone that did not see him will believe it was a woman that was talking. "My dear, I'm really lonely here and I wish I could be with you now. I love you so much and I think about you every time," he said in a sweet feminine voice. As he listened to the telephone conversation, he deduced that the person on the other line had promised to send him some money and this made him to be inquisitive. "Henry, what are you doing on the phone?" he asked when he finished his phone call. "That was Omega, he will soon send some money," he replied with a smile on his face. "What do you mean by that?" "Well, you should know by now, he thinks I am a woman and he wants to date me. That is what most boys are doing." "I thought you knew about all this by now," he replied. At this juncture, Tade asked him more questions about what he was doing but Henry was rather elusive and did not answer him very well. A few days later, he actually accompanied him to the bank where they collected the money by Western Union money transfer. It was a large amount of money and he could not believe his eyes when he saw it. As Henry gave him part of the money, he was stunned and did not even know what to say. Tade was from a poor family and he often had to do odd jobs in order to be able to pay for his education. His family was based in Lagos and his 2 of his older brother and sister, who were university graduates, were unemployed. The third had a job but it was meager and was not even enough for his transport fare to and fro from his place of work. From childhood, he hated poverty and he vowed to get out of it no matter what. He was a hustler by nature and when he was not attending lectures, he sold recharge cards to passers-by at the school gate in his spare time. Also, he occasionally rode commercial motorcycles in the weekends in order to make ends meet. Due to his persistent poverty that never seemed to go away, he finally persuaded Henry, his friend, to teach him the intricacies of internet fraud. He wanted the good things of life and so he eagerly learnt it with all his heart. His first victim was a man called John Stones who lives in Massachusetts in the United States of America. He simply lied to him he was a lady and sent him nude pictures of a woman that he had downloaded from the internet. It took him 3 months to get money from him but it was worth the effort. It was only $800, but that was a handsome sum of money in Nigerian currency. He screamed in ecstasy the day he received the money through Western Union money transfer. As he left the bank he ran down the street and then went to eat in a fast food joint. He had not handled such an amount of money before and he could scarcely believe his eyes. As every young man will do, he decided to enjoy himself with the money and so he organized a big party in a nightclub in Dugby. It was a big party and a lot of scantily dressed ladies were all over the place. He brought the most expensive wine and he and his friends drank themselves to a stupor. In fact, in his drunken state and ecstasy, he poured some of the wine on the floor in order to display how rich he had become. Afterwards, he simply went on a spending spree and like the biblical prodigal son, he finished the money in a short period of time and then, he needed more money. As a result of this, he fully immersed himself in internet fraud and spent a lot of time in front of his newly acquired laptop looking for one victim or the other, attending lectures regularly as he somewhat lost interest in his studies. He was into ladies by now and one of his favorite lovers was a girl called Beatrice. Uchendu Beatrice was a tall, fair-skinned and voluptuous lady who was often scantily dressed and was very carefree. He made a lot of money anyway and after a few months, he rented an apartment for himself in Agbowo and his girlfriend often visited him there. The lecture had been long and boring and he was glad when it was finally over. His best friends in class, Chukwuma and Deo, were sitting beside him and they were surprised he bothered to come to class today as he was known to be a truant. After the class, the 3 friends went to his newly rented apartment inside Agbowo. When they were inside, his 2 friends engaged themselves in a quarrel that seemed very interesting to him. Chukwuma was a very intellectual friend of his who often voiced out his opinion on various issues. Look, going to see a babalao to do charms is backward and superstitious. These charms don't work. I mean, the other day, I heard that people are now using ladies' pants as charms in order to make money. This is pure superstition. What you call juju is nonsense and a product of primitive African thinking, he said. Mr. Professor, all this philosophy you have learnt is affecting you. Look, African juju is real. I pray it does not affect you one day. There is a girl in Port Harcourt who was used for rituals by one of these rich politicians. She was a runs girl that sleeps with rich men for money. Unfortunately, she fell into the hands of a ritualist and she went missing. When she was found, she had run mad and her parents had to take her to a pastor for prayers, Deo replied. That is rubbish and superstition. The problem with us in this country is that our worldview is not scientific. This stuff of yours cannot be proven scientifically. The world is scientific. Stop all these balderdash. At this juncture, they descended into an argument. Tade did not say anything as he had not really thought about it before and he really had no opinion about the issue. It was a cold morning and Tade rolled on his bed. He had spent the night with one of his numerous girlfriends and he really enjoyed himself. A few minutes later, his phone rang and he knew who was on the line. It was his best friend, Henry, and they had an important appointment. He sent his lover away and went to his place immediately. Soon, the two of them were going out of Lebanon till Jebu Ode. He had told him what they were going to do and after thinking about it for some time, he had decided to consent to it. When he got till Jebu Ode, they went to a house located in a small town called Ichalup. When they entered, they saw a middle-aged man sitting in the middle of various fetish items and occultic paraphernalia. There were various carved idols in front of him and generally, everything about him looked sinister. "Ah, my son, you have come today," he said. "Yes, Baba, you know I will always come to you," he replied as he and Henry prostrate before him. The witch doctor said, "So my children, what do you want again?" "Henry, who is this young man you have brought here?" Henry replied, "He is my friend, we are into Yahoo business together." Tade asked for a charm to make white people do his bidding, and the witch doctor gave him a fose and a bowl, with instructions on how to use them. At the 411 Night Club, Henry attributed his success to the efficacy of his charms. He said, "I don't see anything wrong with Yahoo business, we are paying the white man back in their own coin." Most people agreed, except for one middle-aged man. In New Life Church, Jericho, Tade followed Henry and enjoyed the atmosphere. The pastor preached about giving to the Lord, and Henry made a pledge, which surprised Tade, knowing his involvement in internet fraud and money rituals. After the service, Tade spent the night with his girlfriend Beatrice, who told him that many young men in the church were into internet fraud, and it was an open secret. From then on, Tade started attending the church regularly. Tade did not really like using charms and fetish objects, but whatever the witch doctor was doing seemed to be working and they were making a lot of money, and so he set his reservations aside. Henry on the other hand took to it like fish to water. He was greedy and he wanted more money as what he realized from his internet crime was now too meager for the kind of expensive lifestyle he had developed over time. The man as usual said all sorts of incantations and gave them even more fetish objects, but what he requested for at the end of the day shocked him to his bone marrow. Henry on his part was unperturbed anyway, and in fact, he was eager to do anything that will fetch him more money. The Hummer Jeep drove in front of the fast food joint with tainted glasses. The car was a thing of beauty and it strolled along like a beauty queen to everybody's admiration. It parked in the parking lot and a beautiful lady alighted from it, and then, the Jeep drove off again. Immediately the car drove off, she started tearing her dress and she became naked. She also started dancing to non-existent music supplied by her imagination, and then, she started shouting and running around. In a nutshell, she had run mad. She was now in her pant and bra, and after running around for some time, she sat naked on the floor and kept on shouting. A large crowd gathered and people felt sorry for her. People said different things. Some people said she had been used for rituals. In fact, there was an attempt to get the car that dropped her, but the car had sped off and nobody could catch up with it. A few days later, Tade accompanied Henry to the bank as he deposited a huge amount of money at the bank. When they got home to their residence in Agbowo, Henry took him aside and said, "Look, you may not believe me, but using that girl for charms worked. Ever since we made that girl run mad, money has been flowing into our arms anyhow. Chukwuma is wrong, the charms are working and I'm getting richer." "But, you made that girl to run mad, that was very wicked of you. I mean, I don't even know what to think. That girl has a family and you are very wicked." "Look, I don't care, life itself is not fair. I rubbed the charms on her private part after making love to her and now, all her destiny has been transferred to me," he replied. "Look, I used to think all of this is superstition, but now, I don't even know what to believe. If Chukuma was around, he will say the girl was suffering from some psychotic or psychiatric disorder, but maybe your charms did the damage on her. Anyway, we are making money, but we have to be careful as you, Henry, are getting too sinister for my liking, Tade replied. The music was loud, soothing and enchanting. His best friend Henry was now a millionaire. In fact, he built a new house recently and as a result, he organized a big party to celebrate his latest achievement. There was alcohol everywhere and Henry on his part drank to a stupor. His girlfriend, Stacy, was by his side and he kissed her as he drank from the bottle. As Stacy was on his laps, she tapped him by the shoulder and said, "Look at the door." As he looked towards where she was pointing, he could not believe his eyes. Some policemen with guns were standing at the door. The whole place was now silent like a graveyard as everybody was shocked. Before he had the time to say anything, they handcuffed him alongside some of the young men at the party, including Tade. Nemesis had caught up with him at last. The witch doctor had assured him that he will not be caught, but time had proven him wrong. The police investigated their case and what they discovered even took him, Tade, by surprise. They found out that Henry was actually into money rituals. In other words, he is into money rituals. In other words, he was killing people for money rituals. In fact, he, Tade, was linked to the crime. However, after further investigation, he was exempted from it, but then, he was found guilty of internet fraud, impersonation, obtaining money under false pretenses and other crimes. Their judgment was fast and swift. The evidence was too obvious. "You are hereby sentenced to 18 months in jail without an option of fine," the judge said with an air of finality in his voice. On this particular day, Tade broke down in tears and he did not even know what to say or think. Henry's punishment was harsher. He was sentenced to 7 years. Imprisonment. As the policemen led him to jail, he felt ashamed of himself. After serving his sentence, Tade walked out of the gate of the prison with a sigh of relief. His mother and brother were waiting for him. The prison warder escorted to the gate and he hugged his mother and brother with tears in his eyes. His mother could not totally condemn him because the money he made from his illegal business was used to pay for the rent of the house we're staying in Solo, Lagos, and in general, to take care of the family. When he was back in Lagos, he visited some of his friends and they tried to persuade him to go back into internet crime. They told him that if only he had been smart enough, he could escape the long arm of the law. In fact, some of his friends were still very rich and they had not been caught for their crimes. He incidentally was now back to square one and the temptation of going back into crime was very strong. A few months later, one of his friends took him to a beer parlor in Isolo, Lagos, and as usual, most people were discussing football and politics. A young man called Delhi was leading the discussion. "Look, this country is still in shambles. According to the United Nations report, Nigeria is now the poverty capital of the world. Around 75% of Nigerians now live below the poverty line. The former governor of Lagos State stole 9 billion naira from the local government funds. This country has no future." Tade had heard something like this ever since he was a kid. He thought of his own future and how he and his family could get out of poverty. His elder brother was earning peanuts in his newfound job, and his older brother and sister were still unemployed. At this juncture, he wondered if he should go back into his life of internet crime. After all, some of his friends had not been caught and they promised him they will teach him how to outsmart th police. As he sat in the beer parlor, realized he was in a dilemma and wondered what next. That's the end of the story, but if you are giving opportunity to advise him, what advice are you going to give me? Write it on the comment section. Thank you for watching and listening. Please do well to subscribe for more amazing videos.